The Return of the King, Appendix A, The Númenorian Kings. 1. Númenor. Fëanor was the greatest of the Eldar in arts and law, but also the proudest and most self-willed. He wrought the 3 jewels, the Silmarilli, and filled them with the radiance of the 2 trees, Telperion and Laurelin, that gave light to the land of the Valar. The jewels were coveted by Morgoth the enemy, who stole them and, after destroying the trees, took them to Middle-earth and guarded them in his great fortress of Thangorodrim. Against the will of the Valar, Fëanor forsook the Blessed Realm and went in exile to Middle-earth, leading with him a great part of his people. For in his pride he purposed to recover the jewels from Morgoth by force. Thereafter followed the hopeless war of the Eldar and the Edain against Thangorodrim, in which they were at last utterly defeated. The Edain, or Etani, were 3 peoples of men who, coming first to the west of Middle-earth and the shores of the Great Sea, became allies of the Eldar against the enemy. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Muriel. Are you all ready to get into a deep dive for episode 4 of Amazon Prime's The Lord of the Rings, The Muppetry of Power? Episode 4 opens with Queen Regent Tamriel in an audience chamber, blessing a few Númenorian babies who are being held by their mothers. Alright, it's the whole, monarch, president, kissing babies shtick, fine. And then there's a quake, a shake, and she mentions the Valar being a bit angry, so they're suggesting there are supposed to be earthquakes in Númenor, whatever, and then, guess what? A ginormous cataclysmic tsunami comes in and destroys Almenelos, and Queen Regent Tamriel wakes up. I'm going to get back to this point because there's this huge, ginormous, idiotic problem with this, and you then switch to a scene of a little plaza in Almenelos, so the capital city of Númenor, and you see the smiths who got beaten up by Halbro in episode 3. One of them is just talking to this little crowd, and to prop up this racism subplot between elves and human beings, he is starting to say that Queen Regent Tamriel is being too nice to this elf Galadriel, and he says, "The elves will come to our shores and take our trade. They're gonna take our jobs!" If you're familiar with that episode from South Park, I don't actually watch South Park, but I am familiar with that episode, and I thought about this straight away. What is it with injecting, just straight, without any hint of subtlety whatsoever, 21st century politics into this thing? An actual reference to anti-immigration rhetoric based on, the loss of jobs for poor white folks. Are we gonna get an Númenorian or Elvish equivalent of Karl Marx as well? Just Das Númenor Kapital? Okay, so elves are gonna come to Númenor and steal the jobs of the Númenorians. Just fucking hell, that was so bloody stupid, just, wow, much subtle. But then our Pharazôn comes in, but I'm just gonna call him Farry, because honestly, he's a paltry version of the actual Pharazôn of the source material, who was this, a bad guy, but a great Númenorian commander and leader who seizes power in Númenor. He is just this neutered counselor to the Queen Regent. Maybe he's going to transform into the actual Pharazôn of the source material at some point, but right now he's a bit meh. But so Farry comes along and he tries to calm the situation, and is basically saying that you don't need to worry about the elves because we are Númenorians, we are great on our own merits, we don't need to worry about the elves. That was actually somewhat more accurate because yes, Pharazôn and his kingsmen and his faction of the Númenorian population actually believe in the superiority of the Númenorian civilization, so that's actually good. The way it was delivered though was a bit wonky with that whole 21st century politics bit. That was stupid as fuck. So Farry is like, we're great Númenorians, don't worry, the situation is under control, I'm gonna buy everyone drinks. Yes, it makes sense for a politician to do that kind of thing, I suppose, but in that context, it just felt off, sue me. The problem remains, of course, that it doesn't make any sense because there's no fucking context given for why there's so much anti-elvish racism among the Númenorians. It's based on thin air within the show's world building. Where does it come from? As someone familiar with the source material, you would actually know. But without that, What is it based on? The actor's fine for now. Like I said, I'm just not sold on that portrayal of Pharazôn. It's just very lackluster compared to what he's supposed to be in the source material. Just say, it doesn't really convince me as a villain. Also, apparently he has a son called Kemal. I'm just going to call him Kevin, because why the hell not at this point? And they're obviously propping up a new ship between this Kevin and Kemeärien. So Isildur's sister, who's going to architecture school, so Kemeärien is what I'm going to call that ship. You have Galibrand, you have Kemeärien. Who gives a fuck? But alright, I guess you need some CW level romances in this thing because reasons. And also because, I don't know, maybe they're trying to go for like a Romeo and Juliet, someone from the faithful and someone from the future King's Men who aren't yet established, but whatever. So two, warring houses, star-crossed lovers from two sides of the divide, maybe? I mean, I don't care. I really do not care. Then you switch to Gally, Miriel, and Elendil in a room. Again, an audience hall, whatever. Elendil refers to himself as some petty lord once again, so just, pushing that nail in the coffin of lord butchering, yay! And so Miriel and Gally once again have a very tense exchange because Gally is trying to convince Miriel to give her an army to go to the Southlands and help them fight orcs and put Halbro on his throne. Gally just continues to be an absolute bitch with no diplomatic skills whatsoever. Miriel, I don't like her either, but I can understand her position a bit more because she is a monarch out for her people's interests, I guess. So, yeah, Gally tries to convince Miriel, but I'm like, to be fair, why would Miriel give a fuck? Obviously, in this fanfiction, Númenor is an isolationist kingdom. Why would they care about the lowly men of the Southlands? Like, legit, why would they care? And then Gally goes on about reforging an alliance between elves and Númenor. And I'm like, first off, what the fuck are you even referencing here, though? Are you referencing the end of the War of Wrath? Because at that point, the Edain were not Númenorians yet. Or are you referencing the actual timeline of the Second Age, which Amazon has purposely butchered? You see what I mean? Nothing fucking makes sense in this thing. Like, seriously, they drop items of lore without any fucking context to prop them up, which then means absolutely nothing to non-Tolkien nerds, and to actual Tolkien nerds who know about this shit, it makes absolutely no fucking sense, and it's borderline offensive, so yay. And then Gally being Gally, she pulls one of her signature big mad faces and she goes, there is a tempest in me, and I'm like, yeah, that's what antidepressants are for. Boohoo, Gally, just go get a fucking shrink at this point. But then Gally thinks of a brilliant idea to get Miriel on her side. She pulls the daddy card and she tells Miriel, look, I'm gonna go and talk to your dad. See what your dad has to say about this. And then it's Muriel's turn to be Big Mayor. She's like, excuse me, bitch? Hell no, you're talking to my dad? Like, no, I'm the Queen Regent. You're not gonna go to my daddy. Like, I'm the one in charge here. So that obviously upsets Muriel quite a bit. And there's just this staring contest between her and Gally. They're like, who can have the bitchiest stare in this thing? So it's Lord of the Rings, the Stairs of Power. And then, well, Gally is chucked in a jail cell. So she's back with her future boy toy, Halbro! Then we move on to a throwaway scene of basically Isildur failing his Naval Academy test, Whippy, because once again on the boat he looks at Meneltama and hears Isildur in a feminine voice. I don't know what that's about, so everything goes belly up. He gets booted out of Naval Academy, but his two buddies also get booted out because they're held responsible for his fucking up. There's a bit of what I'm going to call boy drama in the street. Everyone's angry, everyone's upset. Okay, moving on. Then we come back to Arondir and the Orkies. I mean, I like the orcs, to be fair. They're under this, tunnel covered by cloth. Now, I didn't notice this last time in episode 3, but the way that was set up was extremely fucking stupid as well, because they dug a trench for miles and covered it up in cloth instead of actually digging underground, as you would expect orcs to do. Anyway, obviously, don't try and think about this too hard. So, they bring him to Adar. So we finally meet Adar, played by the actor who played Benjen Stark in Game of Thrones, if you're interested. Adar is obviously some kind of elf. So father, could he be a... But even that, how would that work though? A father of the orcs. So he must be very, very bloody old. Because if you're not aware, in the Legendarium, the orcs are actually corrupted elves. That's how the orc race got started. Elves were captured by Morgoth and tortured so fucking much that their souls and their bodies were corrupted into becoming orcs. orcs. It's kind of sad. Adar's still clearly an elf, though Arondir doesn't seem convinced by this, and he's like, who are you? And then Adar goes into, I mean, I didn't mind his performance. He goes into a spiel about, you've been told lies. You actually hear that in the trailer. You've been told lies about Middle-earth. To get rid of those lies, you'd have to start from scratch, blah blah, and he mentions the Valar. Once again, the Valar are in fact mentionable, and he says, I want to become a god. So an evil apotheosis subplot. Okay, fine. I'm like, an elf can't become a Valar, but I mean, we're in full fanfiction mode anyway, so why not, I suppose. And then Adar tells Arondir to go back to the Haradrim group and bring them a message. But before I move on from that, I do have to go into mini rant mode once again, because Adar also asks Arondir, where do you come from? And Arondir says, in Elvish, fucking Baleriand! And I'm like, oh, just fucking... Again! So, you can in fact mention Baleriand, but you can be fucking asked to show the map with Baleriand in the intro montage. How the fuck am I supposed to take these showrunners seriously? I'm so sick and tired of this incompetent muppetry on their part. It's like you can't stick to your own in-show world building. You obviously can mention some things which, you know, touch on the First Age from the freaking appendices I read from at the very beginning. You can mention Baleriand, but what, you didn't think that mattered at all in the intro to set up the rest of the story? No? But now you can just name drop Baleriand like that? Fuck off. So then we move on back to Bronwyn. So, you know, that group of people who've gone back to their watchtower place, which is obviously knockoff Helm's Deep, or I mean, that's how I'm choosing to see it. Bronwyn is somehow leading her village for reasons. She's the village healer. Why is she in charge of them though? Why is she their leader? I mean, okay, fine. They're running out of food because apparently they couldn't take 5 minutes out of their time before migrating to take provisions with them on the road. No, because we needed a plot contrivance to send Bronwyn's son back to the village to have action happening, because that is intelligent script writing and storytelling, isn't it? So yeah, they're running out of food. This creepy old guy shows a bunch of potatoes. Okay, cool. And so Theo's like, there's still food in some warehouse back in the village. No, they're orcs. You can't go there. You'll get massacred. And Bronwyn, being, well, in this case, a responsible mother, I suppose, she's like, no, my son, no, not a single grown-ass man, you know, volunteers to go there, because the Haradrim are all lowly barbaric peasants, because they descend from the people who allied with Morgoth, I guess, maybe. But so anyway, Theo goes there with his buddy Rowan, I think he's called, and so they go back to the village, and you fucking know what's gonna happen, right? Orcs are going to attack, obviously, because at one point the sun is covered up by clouds, and Rowan is very scared, understandably. They do have a wheelbarrow filled with food, so he's very nervous. He just wants to leave, and Theo is like, no, I can get more food, like a sack of rice or something. But then, yeah, basically the darkness descends. Rowan just runs. He runs for it like, oh, fuck this, I'm going home with the food. There's a bit of like what I'm gonna call a horror chase montage thing. It was fine. A bit of action, I suppose. I mean, I knew it was gonna happen, but okay. And then Theo hides in a well as the orcs are going around the village, because one of them did jump Theo for a hot minute, and Theo had his evil sword thing which draws from his blood to construct itself, and that's exactly what the orcs were looking for, because, you know, duh, that was bloody obvious from the beginning. Yeah, we found a sword, we gotta get our sword for a master, yeah. So yeah, Theo runs, hides in a well. Moving on, we're back in Eregion with Elrond, Celebrimbor, and then in a few seconds back to Khazad-dûm, which is 5 minutes down the road, if you recall. You see this forge being constructed, so they got that arrangement with the dwarves going, apparently. No idea of the passage of time, of course, because that forge is already fairly underway, so how many days have passed? No fucking clue, but that's just such a minor quibble at this point with everything else that's so bloody wrong. So, in the exact same room with the exact same costumes, again, a bit for near $1 billion, I would expect a bit more variety in the sets, but so Celebrimbor, who still should not look like that, and Elrond have a bit, once again, of an exchange. Arendil is finally name dropped, Elrond's dad. And then, because reasons, Celebrimbor says, kind of staring off into space, he says, you know, I talked to your father once, and he said that one day I would get help in the shape of my own descendants or some shit. And I'm like, yay, how convenient, a prophecy which lays out exactly what happens in the episode. I'm like, what was the point of that, narratively speaking? mean, I guess they have to set up the fact that prophecies are such a big deal because they're absolute shite. Narrative set up and payoff, I guess. Okay. And then, Elrond goes back to Khazad-dûm, which is 5 minutes down the road because no horses. It's just fast traveling, except, when we need to see Gally ecstatically but creepily happy. So we see Elrond in Disa and Durin's house unit under the mountain in Khazad-dûm. So he talks with Disa. I do like Disa. And Elrond wants to know what Durin is actually up to, because I guess he sniffs there's something a bit secret-ish going on with the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. And she's like, well, he's busy. And Elrond says this: there's no secret worth concealing with deception. And I kind of bugged on that sentence for a couple of minutes, because I guess it kind of works, but it's clunky at the same time. You know what I mean? It's just a bit too convoluted to say what he wants to say. I would have rewritten that sentence. I don't know, okay, but secrets are kind of meant to be concealed because they are secrets which might require deception. It kind of makes just fucking whatever at this point. And because she gives a bullshit excuse that no, Durin is away mining quartz in the quartz chasm. Okay, it doesn't take long for dwarves to climb down the quartz chasm. I'm like, can't they just jump in the hole? Gally jumped in the ocean. Arondir jumped in the creepy tunnels. Why can't dwarves jump down a mine shaft? Just saying. Elrond figures that this is kind of bullshit, and so he talks shit with her a bit, but still with some measure of respect. And her response is, again, the writing was overall, it was still not good, but it was passable in this episode. But we still get some dumb aphorisms, because Disa says, calling a dwarf dishonest in her own home, that is a recipe for strong gravy. What? What the fuck does that mean? It doesn't mean any. I'm like, do some of these writers know what a metaphor actually is supposed to be like? And then you switch to Disa talking with Durin. It's like, yeah, we managed to, get Elrond off the trail of what we're actually doing. Okay, again, credit where credit is due. I kind of like Disa and Durin's relationship. It's like one of the only non-bitchy, aggressive relationships. They're married and they love each other, and it's kind of sweet, and they have 2 kids, and there is love there, so that's good. I'll give a point for that. But then again with the stupid lines, because Durin says to Disa, yeah, you could talk a water rat into wearing a mink coat. That doesn't mean what she did with Elrond. She basically lied to Elrond. She didn't convince him to do something, which is what that metaphor conveys. You see what I mean? Like, that's not how metaphors work. Okay, whatever. But then you see across the city of Khazad-dûm, you see Elrond sitting down. They have this close-up shot of his mouth because he's listening to them from a distance because magical elf hearing. And so he's mouthing what Durin and Disa say when they tried to do their own version of the creepy, gross, Denethor-eating cherry tomato shot for Return of the King. But then you see Elrond snooping about, and he finds a secret doorway. He kind of does a weird knocking thing that sounded a bit childish to me, but it's just a minor thing. He goes to, a mining room, and basically it's mithril, right? That's what it is. That's what they're mining, which, lore accurate, that I don't mind. Fuck, a Silmaril was nowhere in sight. No mention of the Silmaril. I mean, a little illusion, but not an actual Silmaril, so thank the Valar for that. Like, I would have flipped my shit if that was the actual case. Durin comes along and he's very angry that, Elrond was snooping. He asks Elrond to take an oath that he will not say a word about the fact that they're mining mithril, because it's their way to get glory and get ahead as a people and create beautiful things and armor and stuff. I couldn't help but think, you're making such a big deal about oaths. And that is lore accurate again. No mention of the Oath of Fëanor, even though they could have very easily, and they should have very easily. So he gives them this little nugget of mithril ore, and then they give the name of mithril. The little illusion where I was like, I don't like this. Elrond does say it seems like it's glowing from the inside, kind of like the Silmarils with the light from the 2 trees inside of them. So I was like, don't you dare. But no, they didn't actually go for that route, thankfully. Well, not yet. After that, we get back to Númenor. You see this dude, Kevin, flirting with Kemeärien. Okay, whatever. Not interesting at all, but obviously introducing a new ship that the viewers should care about, if you say so. Then we're back to Númenorian jail, where Gally and Halbro can exchange in a bit of flirty prison banter. And Gally's pacing back and forth in her jail cell, and all I could think was, good for you women, you're keeping your exercise up, even in prison. Halbro is like trying to explain to her how to be a diplomat. Once again, so much fucking wrong about this picture here, but, okay, because, she's a bitch. She acts like a pissy teenager, so she needs a human man to explain to her how to be diplomatic. And I'm like, surely the showrunners purposely want the viewers to hate her, right? Because in what universe is she likable? Because, like, they're overtly painting her as a psycho now. Because Halbrow's like, this is how you should approach the situation. And, you know, you should identify your opponent's fear. And immediately Gally's like, exploit it? I'm like, yo, bitch, you have a problem. Like, you really need to shrink. Like, her immediate response is, I want to exploit my enemy's fears. Not even her enemy, her opponent's fears. Psycho! And Halbrand has to explain to her, no, that is not how you go about it. You need to, what? I can't even remember what he said. You have to help your opponent find a way to master their fear so you can gain mastery over them. Hint, hint, hint. Much subtle hint. And Gally has the light bulb moment of like, oh right, Miriel really lost her shit when I mentioned her dad. So I need to get to the dad ASAP. And along comes Farry with 4 Númenorian guards, and he basically tells her, look, well, we're giving you a ship so you can get back to Middle-earth and, you know, just get the fuck out of here, basically. They open her jail cell. And so, let me be clear, I don't mind a female warrior by any means. But you do have to set it up properly. You do have to do it intelligently. Gally doesn't have her shiv with her. She's in her robe. No weapons. And they have gone for a portrayal where she's a dex build. Not a magic user. You have 4 Númenorian guards with weapons and armor, grown-ass men, and these are Númenorian men. They're not exactly regular men. Well, I mean, they fobbed that portrayal too, obviously, but they are supposed to be tall and just very strong and just above regular human beings. Yet, Gally, in 2 seconds, she kind of just swivels around, and then the next thing you see, she's shutting the door of her jail cell on those 4 Númenorian guards. Come on, you can't expect us to believe this shit. Which, ironically, even the camera people obviously didn't think they could pull off showing this as credible, because you don't actually see Gally KOing those 4 guards. You basically see her pulling off one ninja move, and the very next frame, she's shutting the door of the jail cell. Because there's no way you could show her KOing 4 grown men with spears and armor, and she has nothing, not even her little shiv. There's no way you can make that believable. So, you know, they didn't actually show it. Which, ironically, kind of makes sense, but it doesn't really cancel the fact that it's absolutely fucking stupid. Anyway, moving on. Also, I mean, no. Farry in the corner, again, he's supposed to be a warrior himself, a force to contend with, and he's like in the corner next to Halbro with his sword, and he's like, oh, I'm scared. Then you cut to a brief exchange between Isildur and Arian, who are talking about their studies, basically. It doesn't matter, it's absolutely not important, so moving on immediately. I saw some people commenting on the fact that Menelaus looked like a set from an Assassin's Creed game. I've never played those games, but I know what they look like, and I was like, okay, I mean, not entirely wrong, but I'm like, with Gally being a ninja who can jump on buildings and shit, that's actually like the gameplay in an Assassin's Creed video game. So I'm like, you know what, they were right, this is full-on Assassin's Creed. So Gally's just ninjing again around the city, and she gets into the palace, and she basically breaks a window into one of the towers where Tar Palantir is resting, and you can see he's a very old man, he's sick, on his deathbed. Oh, guess what? Miriel is there. And so then, finally Gally calms down just a wee bit, because she's like, why do you hate us elves? So she's open to receiving an explanation from Miriel. So Miriel references the Valar, and she paints the Valar as being way more hands-on than they actually are in the source material. Again, just saying. Her reasoning is that her dad, Tar Palantir, was a friend of the elves, but that somehow went against the will of the Valar? Like, wait, what? They're just pushing for this conflict separation between the elves and the Valar, as if the elves weren't close to the Valar by definition. It's just, but why though? Because again, there's no further context given for that being the way it is in the show. So basically Muriel is saying, we had to like say fuck you to the elves once my dad got sick and removed from the throne, because we have the feeling that that would piss off the Valar? who gifted us Númenor. And then Gally says, yeah, but you were rewarded because you were faithful to the elves. But it's like, they're both kind of right, but kind of wrong at the same time. It's like a very fragmented representation of what it's actually like in the source material. And I'm like, again, why are you doing it this way? It was just so weird. Like, they're painting the elves as being fundamentally in opposition with the Valar, and that's just not how it is. Or I mean, it could be partially how it is, but the fucking showrunners didn't mention what happened with Fëanor. That's not in the show's world building. So if they'd actually gone with the source material, this would make a modicum of sense. But since they didn't, it makes zero fucking sense. And then Muriel takes Gally to another tower where there's a Palantir. Now, once again, breaking the law because I guess it's fun to do so, Muriel says, we once had 7 Palantirs, and this is the only one that's left. And I'm like, no, wrong. In fact, Elendil, when he leaves Númenor before it just goes to absolute shite, he leaves it with 7 Palantir, or Palantirium, can't remember the plural. So that's the future. In the future, there should still be 7 Palantiri, not just 1. So again, breaking the law because reasons. But it just gets worse. Because Galadriel, Gally, good old Gally, places her hand at Muriel's request on the Palantir. And in this fanfiction, the Palantiri, or I mean, the Palantir, because there's only one apparently, one left, the Palantir is actually a magic fucking crystal ball. Because she gets a vision of the future. The Palantiri don't grant visions of the future. Like, that's just, no, wrong, law inaccurate. And once again, she basically sees the downfall of Númenor, the Akalabeth. She sees the waves engulfing Númenor, just as Tamriel dreamt about, but she also saw it in the Palantir. And I'm like, you absolute fucking Muppets. Never mind the law at this point. From a purely storytelling, narrative perspective, why would you nuke your narrative tension like this? Because basically they're showing what's going to happen. The cataclysmic erasure from the map of Númenor, because they've done fucked up and the gods actually got mad and intervened, which is supposed to be bloody rare. In fact, the top honcho god, the creator of everything, Eru Ilúvatar, was like, fuck y'all, you get punished now. Which is like the only time he intervenes like this. And you show this. Great potential for actual, amazing reveal at the end of the series. Númenor going down like Atlantis below the waves. That would have been like mind-blowing if you're a normie and you don't know about this. Like, oh my god, this is the kind of thing you don't foreshadow. You don't actually show before it happens. Not to mention there's also theming around this, because there's kind of this dynamic tension between agency and destiny with the fall of Númenor, because the humans could have had it not happen, and now they're gonna have to explain why it happens, if it even happens, actually, because I don't trust anything with these Muppets. Why it happens, even though Tamriel foresaw it. Now it's just gonna be like, okay, well, we all know it's gonna disappear. So when it actually happens, it'll be like, oh, well, we knew it was gonna happen. No surprise, whatever. No, just, oh my god, what's happening? It's cataclysmic. Just nothing. It's insane. It's insane. I really don't understand this show at all. Though, oh, it's sweet, because Gally and Muriel have a girl bonding moment when they go, see? Gally goes, see, Muriel, we get one another because I'm the only one who believes Sauron would come back, and no one listened to me. And you too, you're foreseeing the downfall of your kingdom, and no one believes you. So let's ally over our being Cassandra's. Okay, cool. Then we're back in Harad with Theo still in his well, so hiding from the orkies. He finally gets out of the well, gets cornered by an orc, and the orc wants the evil sword. He's like, oh, you, I want the sword. And just as orc is about to chop Theo's arm off, he gets a sword through his chest or something, and guess who it is? Arondir here to save the day, because he was sent back as a messenger. Look, I kind of like Arondir, so fine. So Arondir saves the day, he takes Theo with him, and they start running! So they run through the forest, with orcs chasing. Now, from a purely continuity logic standpoint, I'm like, I don't really understand the geography involved here, because they're running through this thick, forest, or, these woods, copse of trees, whatever. And I'm like, dude, Rowan with the wheelbarrow full of food, didn't he have to go through? Why wasn't he killed by orcs if he had to go through the forest, and the orcs can go in the forest because it's dark enough? Plot contrivances, am I right? So, Theo and Arondir are running, and here again, slow motion. There is a lot of slow motion and dramatic music. In all fairness, there is some of that in PJ's Lord of the Rings. I'm not contesting that. But here it's like so blatantly obvious they're trying to like check this list of items. This is like the Lord of the Rings, this is like the Lord of the Rings, call back to draw in the fans. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's not properly set up. So the payoff feels emotionless, meaningless. I don't care that you're trying to emulate, I don't know, Arwen's flight with Frodo through the forest being chased by the Nazguls, or I guess I was also vaguely reminded of that skirmish at the end of Fellowship where Boromir gets, shot in the chest with arrows. No, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work with Arondir like in slow motion, catching an arrow and then shooting back. No, just do it straight up action. You don't need the slow motion, okay? So they're running, and of course, because like the orcs are sensitive to sunlight. Now, I like the fact they're heliophobic, but they're really pushing this into full-on vampire territory where they're actually burning in the sun. Like, okay, you're belaboring the point there. And then, of course, who should arrive but Bronwyn in the woods? Because, in the meantime, Wheelbarrow Food Dude got back to the watchtower and brought the food, and Bronwyn was like, where's my son? It's like, oops, left him behind. So she went after her son because, to be fair, responsible mother. So Bronwyn gets there, and then the little trio meets up, and then we're running. And then they leave the forest behind. They get out from beneath the trees, and Theo has an injury or something on the leg. He kind of takes some time out for like 5 minutes in the grass. I do want to point though, they're like not that far away from the tree line, and the orcs can't go into the sunlight. Again, this is a bit too much because they can still run under trees. They're not being terribly consistent with the tolerance or lack thereof with regards to sunlight. But okay, fine. So they're still under the trees and they look at the trio. So they can't actually chase after them under direct sunlight, but they're not doing anything. They're just taunting them. And the second Theo is capable of walking again, and then they decide to leave, arrows start flying at them. And I'm like, okay, but for fuck's sake, people, you're telling me what the orcs just refrained from shooting at them for what reasons? It's just plot contrivance after plot contrivance. It doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, realistically, they should have all died there just waiting because they were not that far away from the tree line. But okay. And then we're back at Khazad-dûm. So actually, the dwarves had an accident mining the mithril. There was a cave collapse, or a mine collapse or something. So they're very worried, and so Disa engages in this singing ritual with a few other dwarves to speak to the mountain, to ask the mountain to release the dwarves without too much injury. I like this. Again, credit where credit is due. I do like this. I mean, Tolkien has a lot of singing and rhyming and poetry and stuff in his writings, so that is actually Legendarium to me. And so fair enough. I mean, the dwarves, yeah, they're mountain folk, and they should have magic in relationship to the earth and the deep places and the mountains. So no issue with that. Singing ritual, cool. And in fact, the dwarves are all fine. I think, honestly, the parts of the dwarves, apart from some of those, dumb as fuck aphorisms or pseudo-metaphors, I think those are the least offensive parts to me so far. So they're all fine. Then Elrond has an extra chat with Durin to build up the friendship, I guess. Fine. He does name drop Arondir again, and he gives a bit of lore background for what happened there, but again, just they keep referencing the first stage when they fucked up so egregiously in the first 2 episodes. Is just playing fast and loose with the lore in a way that is deeply offensive to me. But fine, there is no mention of Elwing though, Elrond's mum, but perhaps they can't touch that name. But again, I'm starting to have zero patience for that line of argumentation because clearly they don't really give a fuck about that themselves. Then you do have an exchange between during the son, so during the 4th, and his dad during the 3rd. And there again, I liked their interaction. It was a respectful father-son interaction with decent writing, nothing egregiously stupid was said, and a genuine familial bond is portrayed on screen. Because during the 3rd, it's very angry. He was actually opposed to, during the 4th, getting into the mithril mining, and he was very mad that, there was a mine shaft collapse. But he says to his son, even when I'm mad, I'm always with you, and I respect your decisions as, well, a man dwarf. There's respect there, and there's understanding, and he says, but I do want to know what's happening with the elves and Elrond, though, so go to Linden to figure what's happening. So I like that. Respectful, realistic of, well, human adjacent psychology, I guess. So yeah, I like Durin and Disa. It's a nice marital relationship, and I like Durin the 4th And during the third, it's a nice father-son relationship. And even during's friendship with Elrond, I still don't really like Elrond. He often has a smug look on his face I don't like, but I mean, okay. And then we quickly get back to Arondir, Bronwyn, and Theo getting back to, knock off Helm's Deep, so the Watchtower, and Arondir delivers the message that all the humans there, the Haradrim, should basically bow down to Adar, otherwise they will get massacred. Pretty standard stuff. And then you see Theo talking to the creepy dude who was like complaining about the fact that there are only 5 potatoes remaining. And the creepy dude, he's the one who owned the barn where Theo found the evil sword that draws blood to reconstruct itself. And so creepy dude, I guess, knows about Sauron. And he tells Theo, have you heard about Sauron, my lad? And okay, so something's gonna happen with that, obviously. Okay. And then finally, we get back to Númenor once again. There's so much shifting from plotline to plotline because everything is so poorly set up, you don't really care about any one of them. So we're back in Númenor, and so Gally is basically brought to a pier to get on a ship to get back to Middle-earth because Tamriel believes that being chummy with the elves is against the will of the Valar. Again, why? No, you're not gonna give a reason? Okay, never mind. And then that happens. And Elendil actually says something nice to Gally again. He says, may peace be with you, or something in Elvish, and Gally's just like, meh, because she's Gally. Then Tamriel turns around. She walks down the street. And petals, white leaves from Nimloth start raining down, and she had said previously that was a sign the Valar were upset, crying. She's like, oh no, that's not a good portent, is it? And then next scene is her in, once again, an audience hall with a lot of local Númenorians. She gives a speech about choosing who we want to be, and basically she pulls a 180. Gally gets onto the stage from another room because in fact I guess they turned her ship around, and Tamriel suddenly decided, you know what, the tree, Nimloth cried because I sent Gally away, so I shouldn't send Gally away, so I am in fact going to help her and give her an army to go to the Southlands, because fate, I guess. Okay, because you've, been beating us on the head with the fact the Númenorians are isolationist assholes who don't care about anyone else, who hate the elves, but now the Queen Regent, because Nimloth gives her the will of the gods, decides that, no, we're gonna help Gally. Okay, that's one thing. But then, basically everyone else agrees to go along with this, and then you have this scene where Elendil is basically asking the populace who wants to join us to help the Southlands and go to war, and then everyone starts volunteering. But y'all were shown to be xenophobic isolationists at the beginning of the episode. You hate the elves. You don't give a fuck about the Southlands because you don't have any colonies there, because this is Númenor in the fanfiction. You see what I mean? There is no setup for any of this shit. All of a sudden they changed their minds because Nimloth lost some fucking leaves. And Tamir was like, that's the will of the Valar. Because reasons. And of course Halbro is released. They were gonna have a trial and judge him because he beat up some dudes and broke a guy's wrist, but no, he's released and he's gonna be part of the army, I guess, because he's knockoff Aragorn as well. And it's supposed to be dramatic. You know what I mean? Like, there's the dramatic music playing. It's supposed to be this great ta-da movement where, yay, the humans are gonna ally with Gally and her elves to go help the Southlands. Kind of like, the Rohirrim coming to the aid of Gondor at the last minute. But it doesn't land because nothing is set up properly. It's all empty bullshit. But that's how the episode ends. I actually found this episode worse than episode 3, just straight up. I'm just so over the lore raping, the idiotic script writing, plot contrivances, cliches, absolutely no fucking setup. Nothing is earned so far in this show. Absolutely nothing, which means there is no emotional engagement. It's all empty bullshit, like I said. Empty, shiny, sure, but all that glitters isn't gold. Am I right? Every basic mistake of writing is present in this thing. You have telling not showing, you have very poorly executed exposition dumps, and no proper setup. So the payoff doesn't land, and nothing feels earned, narratively or emotionally. How is this show this bad? I'm legitimately shocked. I finished this episode and I was like, what the fuck is this though? So many times as I was watching, I was like, eh? What does that even mean? And then of course, the lore butchering was just still going full steam ahead. Just, I mean, they're name-dropping Balerion. They're obviously name-dropping lots of stuff from the First Age. And don't, once again, at me with, stop bitching and being a hater because they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion. That's why I read that first fucking paragraph from the appendix. It clearly states the beginning of the story involving Fëanor, the Silmarils, and Morgoth stealing the Silmarils. Yet they chose to ignore all of that for their own intro. I couldn't even laugh this time around. I mean, I laughed a bit during the deep dive. At least in episode 3, I could laugh at some of the stupidity, but here it's just so bloody egregious. Again, the dialogue, the writing itself is a bit smoother in places, but it's the overall narrative, the overall plotting is so bad. The sheer amount of incompetence being displayed by whoever is responsible. Again, I don't want to be mean about this. I don't want to be overly harsh towards the people involved in this endeavor. I'm sure there are people who are passionate about the Legendarium or just passionate about their craft involved in this project, but clearly there are also incompetent people, and this shit needs to be called out. Because how can you spend so much money and fob this in so bloody hard? There's a certain point where it's like, are they doing this on purpose? Are they purposefully trying to make this crap? Because that's what it feels like sometimes. It's just, wow. Just before this season ends, because I'm so not continuing with how bad this is, at least show me Gally and Halbro fucking, and then reveal that Halbro is Sauron, because that would be so fucking stupid but funny at the same time. Because at that point I want to see the apologists' reaction to that. I want to see how they're going to justify that one. Yeah, but actually Tolkien didn't say that Galadriel did have sex with Sauron. Y'all know some people are going to say that. It's still pretty in some places, I suppose. I still like Talmiral's costumes and headgear. Those are very nice looking. And I guess Adar looks villainous enough. That's the best I can say about that, so yay. Like I said, I kind of like the parts with the dwarves and Casa too. That's like the least offensive to me, and I still like Arondir as an elf, though here it wasn't very interesting. But just Gally, like, oh, why did they portray Gally this way? It's offensive. Like, there's some people who think that if you criticize Gally, you're being sexist, but I'm like, I'm sorry, bruvs, but no, the showrunners are the sexist ones with how they butchered Galadriel's portrayal. Like, for real though. Anyway, I'm done ranting for today about that. If you want to share your thoughts about this episode, you're more than welcome to do so, obviously, whether in the comments down below or on the Discord server. I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Do take good care of yourselves. Thank you for the continued support, and I shall see you all reasonably soon in another video. But until then, bye-bye.